It's the end of the week. Friday evening has arrived, and after 5 long days of work, you're finally free. A little relaxation feels well earned, and like so many others, Sarah decides to wind down with a drink, or maybe a few. But have you ever stopped to think about what's really happening inside your body with each sip of alcohol? Tonight, we're going to trace those changes as they unfold, moment by moment, following Sarah through her night out to see the effects of alcohol from the very first taste onward. The night kicks off at precisely 10:06. Sarah orders her usual, a skinny margarita. The mix of lime, sweetness, and tequila hits her tongue, but beneath that pleasant flavor, biology is already in motion. The ethanol, the active ingredient in her cocktail, is a tiny compound that slips easily into her bloodstream. Within mere minutes, it's on the move, spreading throughout her body. Around her, the bar hums with energy, the clatter of glasses, bursts of laughter, and music that presses against her ears. Normally, this sensory noise would feel overwhelming, but as the alcohol begins to circulate, it softens into a manageable buzz. Warmth creeps through her body. That sensation isn't just in her imagination. It's a direct result of alcohol widening her blood vessels. Expanded vessels let more blood flow near the surface of the skin, creating the impression of heat. But there's a catch. With those vessels open, her body loses warmth faster, which is why many people feel chilled later, even after they've been flushed with warmth earlier in the evening. By 10:21, the process is well underway. Some of the alcohol in Sarah's margarita never even reached her stomach. Roughly 1/5 of it entered directly through the lining of her mouth, slipping into her bloodstream almost instantly. The rest traveled downward, coating her esophagus and pooling in her stomach. Another 1/5 absorbed there, directly through the stomach lining, before moving into circulation. From there, ethanol is carried all across her body, touching every organ, though none more notably than her brain. The portion not absorbed in the stomach moves along into the small intestine, where the real floodgates open. The walls of the small intestine are covered with countless little finger-like projections called villi, each one dramatically increasing the surface area for absorption. Here, the alcohol passes rapidly into the surrounding blood vessels, rushing into the portal vein, which acts like a direct highway to the liver. The liver, our detoxification workhorse, suddenly finds itself bathed in alcohol-heavy blood. Its enzymes, particularly alcohol dehydrogenase, start breaking the ethanol down, but the liver has a fixed pace. It can only handle so much in about an hour. When Sarah drinks more than that, excess alcohol remains in circulation, moving outward to her heart, lungs, and most critically, her brain. By 10:39, she has finished her first glass, and the changes in her mood are noticeable. Sarah is usually tense, quick to worry, but she now feels a small weight lift. Her shoulders settle, her breath eases. This isn't just psychological trickery, it's chemistry. Alcohol dampens activity in the amygdala, the brain region tied to fear and anxiety. In the moment, this feels like relief. The tension that normally coils tight in her body releases slightly, but science warns us that leaning on alcohol for calm can backfire in the long term, worsening stress and anxiety when the drinking stops. The slowdown in her system continues. Alcohol is classified as a depressant, not because it makes people sad, but because it reduces the speed of the central nervous system. Signals between neurons travel more sluggishly, thoughts lose their edge, reflexes ease up. It's like a brake pedal on her usual rapid stream of worries. Her sympathetic nervous system, the part of her body in charge of fight or flight, is temporarily dialed back. Heart rate lowers a touch, breathing feels smoother, muscles loosen. Even her appearance changes. The blood vessel dilation leaves her cheeks a rosy pink, her eyes carrying a subtle sparkle. At the bar, she catches her reflection in the mirror and feels just a little more attractive than usual. Alcohol lowers inhibitions and enhances dopamine release, the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and reward. This wave of dopamine brings an uplift in mood, giving her a short-lived burst of happiness. Simultaneously, alcohol suppresses glutamate, the brain's main excitatory messenger. With that system muted, judgment and coordination begin to fade around the edges. By 10:55, Sarah is swirling the ice cubes in her second drink, nearly finished with it. The liver is already pushing its limits. Remember, it can manage only about one standard beverage per hour. As Sarah orders a third, more ethanol is stacking up in her bloodstream, moving freely toward her brain. Her vision feels softer, her words flow easier. The room's dim corners blur together slightly. The decision-making part of her brain, the prefrontal cortex, is already feeling the impact. This is the region that manages impulse control, planning, and rational thought. With it dulled, the idea of chatting with strangers seems effortless. Conversations feel natural, confidence swells. That's why alcohol often gets called a social lubricant. By 11:16, the effects have accelerated. Sarah, now several drinks in, decides to buy a round of shots for people she's only just met. The gesture feels generous, even exhilarating, though in reality, her judgment is slipping. Spending money recklessly is one of the many subtle signs of impaired decision-making that come with rising blood alcohol levels. At the same time, her body is beginning to betray her in other ways. Coordination falters, her words stumble into each other, and the charming buzz she enjoyed earlier edges towards something messier. The more she drinks, the lighter she feels, giddy almost, like she's floating. Her careful, usually precise speech gives way to a loose stream of chatter. She tells the bartender stories she wouldn't normally share, about her boss, her failed dates, even an embarrassing mishap with superglue. She laughs too loudly for the subdued atmosphere, the sound ringing above the mellow background music. Her once steady movements grow sloppy. She sets her glass down carelessly, liquid sloshing over the rim, a napkin slipping unnoticed to the floor. By the time the clock edges toward midnight, Sarah is already showing visible signs of impairment. She stumbles slightly on her way to the restroom, brushing against tables, nearly toppling someone else's drink. She giggles it off, blaming the low lighting, but the truth is more straightforward. Alcohol is disrupting communication between her brain cells. Balance, speech, vision, all are under strain. Even the lights above the bar seem to pulse with her heartbeat, reality taking on a strange rhythm as her intoxication deepens. The clock creeps closer to midnight, and Sarah's night is shifting into a different phase. It's 11:57 when she pushes herself away from the bar stool to head toward the restroom. The simple act of standing exposes just how much her coordination has unraveled. She bumps a nearby table, nearly knocking a glass onto the floor. She brushes it off with laughter, joking about the dim room. But the truth lies in her biology. Her balance is faltering because alcohol interferes with the way neurons send signals. Muscles don't quite respond in sync, and her sense of spatial awareness is distorted. Even her eyes aren't spared. Her vision is fuzzy, the outlines of objects slightly doubled. Each sip she takes continues to worsen the disconnect. The lights above her blur and seem to pulse with her heartbeat. It's as though her body has been hijacked by someone else. When the bartender asks her a simple question, she barely processes it. Words tumble from her mouth, tangling into one another, producing a half-formed response followed by a forced laugh at her own confusion. By 12:32, with multiple cocktails and that shot still coursing through her system, Sarah is no longer lightly tipsy. She's fully drunk. Even little tasks betray her. She tries to take a selfie, but her phone slips right through her fingers, clattering to the floor. She fumbles again and again before finally managing to steady her grip. Reflexes that should come instantly are now delayed by fractions of a second that feel like an eternity. The alcohol has dulled her nervous system to the point where the most ordinary actions require far more concentration. A new craving takes hold. Her appetite has kicked into overdrive, though it's not real hunger so much as alcohol's effect on her hormones. Normally, chemicals like leptin and GLP-1 help regulate food intake, keeping the body's signals balanced. But alcohol suppresses these regulators, so Sarah suddenly feels ravenous. She waves to the bartender and asks for food, craving something heavy and satisfying. Pete shakes his head. The kitchen has already closed. Frustrated, Sarah unlocks her phone with shaky hands, scanning for late-night options, even asking strangers at the bar where she can grab a bite. Her search leads her next door, into another bar with louder music and more energy. It's now just past 1 in the morning, and though she's trying to maintain that earlier feeling of confidence, the reality is catching up to her. Her liver has long since maxed out on how much alcohol it can process. The excess continues to circulate, amplifying her intoxication. What was once pleasant background music now feels overwhelming. The bass pounding too loud, each note an assault on her senses. Perceptions twist further. A stranger's casual smile strikes Sarah as flirtation. She leans into it, attempting to flirt back, but the other person walks away, leaving her crestfallen. Perceptions twist further. A stranger's casual smile strikes Sarah as flirtation. She leans into it, attempting to flirt back, but the other person walks away, leaving her crestfallen. In her heightened emotional state, the rejection stings more deeply than it should. Alcohol magnifies her feelings, stretching every mood to its extreme, and as if that weren't enough, the nausea finally hits. The wave comes suddenly, sending her racing to the bathroom. She barely makes it in time before vomiting. As unpleasant as it is, this reaction is her body's emergency defense. The stomach is irritated directly by the alcohol and the build-up of acetaldehyde, the toxic byproduct created when the liver tries to break ethanol down, has reached overwhelming levels. With too much alcohol for her system to handle, her body resorts to the fastest method of removal, forcing it out. A fellow patron notices her struggling and kindly holds her hair back while she leans over the toilet. It's an embarrassing moment, but also a turning point. Sarah realizes her body has had enough. Vomiting leaves her drained, her stomach raw, and her head spinning. By 1:30, she knows she can't stay out any longer. She manages to call a cab, though the details blur. Her coordination is so off that she nearly drops her phone again. The ride home feels like a hazy dream. She collapses into her apartment still dressed, makeup smudged, collapsing directly on top of the comforter without even pulling the sheets back. Sleep overtakes her quickly, but it's far from restorative. When morning comes, it's 7:02, and the consequences of the night before are brutal. Sarah wakes with a splitting headache that feels like a hammer behind her eyes. Dehydration is largely to blame. Alcohol suppresses vasopressin, a hormone that helps regulate water balance, which means Sarah's body flushed out far more fluids than it should. Paired with the nausea and vomiting, this left her severely drained. Her mouth feels bone dry, her tongue heavy, her throat parched. Sleep offered little recovery. Alcohol may help someone fall asleep quickly, but it wreaks havoc on the quality of rest. It blocks REM sleep, the critical stage tied to memory, learning, and emotional health. Instead of deep restoration, Sarah's night was filled with restless tossing, bizarre dreams, and frequent waking drenched in sweat. She stares at the sliver of sunlight sneaking past her blackout curtains, wincing as it slices across her eyes like a blade. Her stomach churns with each movement, sending waves of nausea rolling through her. She holds her head, which pounds as though filled with angry insects, buzzing and stinging in unison. Bits and pieces of the previous night flicker in her mind, fragmented and incomplete. She remembers laughter that was too loud, spilling her drink, Pete's worried glance, and a stranger's hand holding her hair back. Shame washes over her. What else happened? Did she say something inappropriate? Did she embarrass herself further? This haziness isn't just a matter of memory. It's biological. When blood alcohol levels climb high enough, the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, becomes impaired. New long-term memories fail to form, creating blackout periods where events simply don't get recorded. The gaps are unnerving, forcing Sarah to try to reconstruct what happened from half-formed impressions. At 8:14, after lying in bed groaning for over an hour, Sarah drags herself into the kitchen. Every step feels like wading through quicksand, but her thirst is unbearable. On the counter sits a glass she left from the night before. She fills it with cold water and drinks deeply. Hydration is her body's most immediate need. Alcohol's diuretic effect has thrown off her electrolyte balance, leaving her depleted. She'll need more than water. Electrolyte-rich foods like bananas or broth would help. But in her state, even water feels like salvation. Unfortunately, there is no instant cure. Recovery from a hangover takes time as the body slowly clears out the remaining alcohol and its toxic byproducts, repairing the strain of the night. Rest, fluids, and patience are her only allies, though the lingering fog and fatigue will likely shadow her through the day. By the time Sarah is sitting in her kitchen, clutching her glass of water, her body is still working overtime to purge what's left of the alcohol. As miserable as her hangover feels, what's more concerning are the hidden risks beneath the surface. Many people assume that everyone processes alcohol in the same way, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Several factors make Sarah more vulnerable than others, both in the short term and over the long haul. For starters, biology matters. Women generally metabolize alcohol differently than men. Their bodies often carry more fat tissue and less water relative to body weight. Because ethanol dissolves better in water than fat, there's less fluid to dilute the alcohol in Sarah's system. That means even with the same number of drinks as a man of similar weight, she ends up with a higher blood alcohol concentration. On top of that, women's stomachs typically produce lower amounts of the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase, which helps break down ethanol before it enters the bloodstream. Taken together, these biological differences leave women like Sarah more exposed to alcohol's effects and its long-term consequences. Body size plays its part too. Someone smaller feels alcohol's punch more quickly than someone heavier, simply because the alcohol spreads through less total volume. Sarah isn't particularly large, so each drink she consumes has a stronger relative effect than it would on a bigger individual. Then there's the matter of food, or in Sarah's case, the lack of it. Skipping dinner before a night out is a decision many people make, but it carries a steep price. When the stomach is empty, alcohol passes into the small intestine more quickly, which dramatically speeds absorption. Eating beforehand slows this process, giving the liver more time to keep up. Sarah went straight from work to the bar without a proper meal, and by the time hunger caught up to her later in the night, the kitchen was closed. That decision made every sip hit harder. Medications add another layer of risk. Mixing alcohol with any drug, whether prescription, over-the-counter, or even herbal supplements, can trigger dangerous interactions. Sarah takes medication for anxiety, which complicates things further. Alcohol is a depressant, and so are many anxiety medications. Combining them amplifies sedation and can intensify side effects. It also means she feels drunk more quickly and suffers worse consequences later. All of these variables intersect, and the more often Sarah drinks heavily, the more these risks accumulate. A single night of excess might end in nothing more than a brutal hangover, but repeated episodes chip away at her health, setting the stage for long-term damage that creeps in quietly over time. The liver is usually the first organ that comes to mind when people think about alcohol damage, and for good reason. It's the main processing plant for ethanol. In the early stages, heavy drinking can cause fat to build up in liver cells, a condition called fatty liver. If drinking continues, inflammation can develop, leading to alcoholic hepatitis. Prolonged abuse can ultimately scar the liver permanently, a condition known as cirrhosis. With scar tissue replacing healthy tissue, the liver's ability to function diminishes drastically. The consequences ripple outward, swelling in the abdomen and legs, hormonal imbalances, even increased risk of liver cancer. But the liver isn't alcohol's only target. Ethanol is a carcinogen officially recognized as increasing the risk for multiple types of cancer. These include cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, colon, liver, and breast. The more a person drinks and the longer they maintain heavy habits, the greater the danger. The heart also suffers under chronic drinking. Alcohol weakens the heart muscle, disrupts normal rhythm, raises blood pressure, and forces the heart to work less efficiently. Over time, this elevates the chance of heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. Even moderate levels of alcohol can have cardiovascular consequences, despite the persistent myth that drinking small amounts might be good for the heart. Mental health ties into this picture as well. Many people drink in hopes of calming stress or masking painful emotions, but the relief is temporary, and frequent drinking can actually worsen depression and anxiety in the long run. It can also increase the risk of developing new mental health disorders. Alcohol and emotional health form a vicious cycle. The more someone drinks to cope, the more their underlying struggles may intensify. For Sarah, these risks may not be visible yet, but if her weekend pattern continues, the damage could build beneath the surface. What begins as occasional overindulgence can slowly transition into something more troubling: alcohol use disorder. A UD, as it's known clinically, is a chronic condition where a person loses control over their drinking. It isn't about willpower or morality. It's a complex disease shaped by genetics, environment, and psychology. The signs can start subtly. Cravings might creep into daily thoughts. A glass of wine at dinner turns into 3 or 4 more than intended. Promises to stop after just one dissolve as the night goes on. Tolerance begins to build, requiring larger amounts to achieve the same buzz. When alcohol is withheld, withdrawal symptoms like shakiness, nausea, and insomnia may appear. These patterns don't always develop overnight. Sometimes they unfold gradually, almost invisibly, until drinking begins to interfere with relationships, work, or health. AUD can range from mild to severe, but the earlier it's recognized and addressed, the better the chances of recovery. Professional treatment can involve therapy, medication, or support groups, each tailored to help someone regain control. Sarah, like many others, may not think of herself as the type to develop a problem, but that's the tricky part. Alcohol doesn't discriminate. It affects people across all walks of life, and repeated episodes of heavy drinking, even framed as just having fun, can set the stage for dependency. Recognizing that possibility isn't about judgment. It's about understanding the stakes and making informed choices. Her hangover today will fade. She'll hydrate, rest, and eventually feel like herself again, but her body will remember. Every binge adds stress to her organs, to her brain, to her mental health. The lesson hidden in her rough morning isn't simply that hangovers are painful. It's that alcohol carries both immediate and long-term consequences that are easy to overlook in the moment. By stepping back and understanding what's happening inside, by stepping back and understanding what's happening inside, Sarah and anyone else listening can make decisions with a clearer picture of the costs. Responsible drinking doesn't mean never having fun. It means knowing where the line is and what lies beyond it. Because the truth is, while alcohol can bring a fleeting sense of confidence, ease, and connection, the risks can quietly outlast the buzz by years.